Jeff, I believe this is your first trip here.
First trip,
Well,
yeah.
How come? What's happened? Why haven't you been visiting us before?
I only go places where I'm invited. If they don't want me, I don't try to impose myself. No, I mean, it's funny because I've played in Indonesia so many times and over maybe the last 20 years. And so it's close.
Like 40 times, right?
And well, I might be pushing it a little bit, but I've been there often. And no, I just, it's just one of those things, I just haven't had a chance, but I'm delighted to be here. It's really been fun so far and looking forward to the rest of the week here.
Yeah, I imagine you would have been here before?
About 5 times.
Yeah.
With Yellow Jackets and with Robin Ford and a band actually that we had together with Gary Novak, who's here with Jeff and I.
Yeah.
Named Renegade Creation.
Yeah.
So we were here.
Yeah. You haven't been here before, but I've seen you in 1984 on a riverboat in New Orleans.
Wow! How about that?
Yeah.
I remember. I have a very vivid memory of that trip because is that when they had the World's Fair in New Orleans?
I think so. Yeah.
Yeah, because the World's Fair was right near the riverboat, and we actually got to see the. We sort of intentionally got lost on the grounds of where the World's Fair was happening. They were just putting it together at that time. It hadn't opened yet.
Yeah.
And they had a space shuttle there that was on display, and we got to see the space shuttle before the security grabbed us and told us to get the heck out of there.
That's great.
Like, oh man, the security came in on us, pretty intense. But we were taking our pictures in front of the space shuttle, and everything was great.
Yeah. So that was 84. You're still going. You're still playing fusion music. Apart from your obvious talent, what factors do you think have allowed you to play this kind of music for so long?
I mean, I think a lot of jazz musicians have. Well, first of all, we were just kind of talking about this earlier that we don't necessarily. I mean, we love jazz and we play jazz, but we love all kinds of music. We're just musicians, period. So I think having that kind of curiosity and involvement with just loving music and constantly, looking for things to get excited about, and just stay really engaged with searching. I mean, that's kind of like what improvisation is about. You're sort of on a search mission to just find that great performance, or that great unity that you find when you just kind of lose yourself in the music and play a great solo. And I think that's part of the jazz ethic, and I think that helps keep it fresh and keep it interesting for me personally and for people that listen to the music that I'm making also.
Yeah, it's interesting you talk about that search for the moment or whatever on stage. I saw the John Scofield trio here earlier in the year, and he went off on a couple of tangents, and I thought, where the hell is he going? And he looked at the band and follow me if you want, this is where I'm going. And there was an element of danger in it.
Absolutely.
I wonder if you guys have been in that situation where you've gone out there and thought, how the hell am I going to get back?
Well, I mean, that's, if you don't take a risk, then, you're not going to achieve something really great. So, I mean, if you just play your old bag of tricks and play the same old corny stuff every night, it's not going to be that interesting for you or the audience. But if you take those risks and try to push it beyond the boundaries of what you normally play, then there's going to be. And it's funny you should mention John, because we were buddies in music school. We knew each other back then, and he was one of those guys that, even though he was a student, he was already very accomplished, and there was already, kind of an aura about him and a reputation among the students that this guy's really fantastic.
Yeah.
And I was lucky to have met him and to play with him back in those days.
Yeah. And Jimmy, you played with Jeff for quite a while. What is it about Jeff Lorber's music that you enjoy?
Well, I've been aware of Jeff's music since his first record in the mid-'70s. So I knew of Jeff's music, and then Jeff and I kind of crossed paths on several junctures during the years on sessions, and when we had the opportunity to work on a special little project that was actually put together by Eric Marienthal, we ended up going to Russia and the Ukraine. This was about 8 years ago, something like that.
Something like that, yeah.
And I think on that trip we really kind of locked into one another. And I had been producing some stuff, and I brought Jeff in on co-producing some things with me, and then he invited me to come co-produce the resurrection of the Jeff Lorber Fusion, which I was honored to do. And so just working together over the last 6 years, it's been terrific. I mean, we found out, I think, a lot about each other, and one thing that I know has been kind of a really wonderful revelation is that we both really like a lot of different kinds of music. So we're always discussing different things and different ways of doing things, and that's a very fertile and creative relationship.
Yeah, the Hacienda album that you did included a lot of different influences and musical ideas.
Mm-hmm.
The current album is perhaps a return to your roots, if you will.
Somewhat, yeah.
Yeah, I think the Hacienda record was a little more experimental, where we sort of like stretched out in some different areas, and I think that's a good description of those two records. I guess maybe we felt on the Hacienda record some of those experiments we might have taken it a little bit too far,
yeah.
And we wanted to reel it in a little bit on the Step It Up album. But I just want to address what Jimmy said, which is that, well, first of all, I really like collaborating with people, because I found that I sort of learned the hard way that if I try to do everything myself, I'll kind of run out of ideas, and it'll just end up like a certain way, because I'll just fall into patterns that are that I like. So I like working with somebody that'll help get me out of that and contribute ideas. And Jimmy's contributed a lot. I mean, I think we really have complementary talents, because obviously he plays the bass, I play the piano, but he takes a little bigger picture view, and he knows a lot of good musicians. He's really brought in some great talents into our circle that have really helped expand our music. One example would be a guy that we just played with the other day. We're working on a new album right now, and Larry Kuntz, who's a great jazz guitarist, who's featured on a bunch of my albums, but he has a really unique approach. And so, and the last album we had Bob Minster, who was just phenomenal. It's one thing to like just listen to a guy play, but then when you're in the studio with him and you hear how he interprets your music, I mean, that gives you a whole other appreciation of his talents. And it was just, I mean, I couldn't be more thrilled with what Bob contributed to the record. He just played so beautifully. His solos were really fresh and musical and original. And another good friend of mine, Bobby Colombi, who I worked with as a producer, co-producer, he heard Bob Minster stuff and was suggesting that I should really study his improvisational approach, because I could learn a lot. But I'm sure he's right.
I think we all could.
But anyway, so it's been a good partnership, and I really appreciate working with somebody that has a lot to add and to offer, and it's just like taking my universe of ideas and his and Jimmy's universe of ideas. We put them together and we get something much bigger.
Yeah.
And
the Step It Up album does have a lot of guest appearances by musicians adding their parts.
Robin Ford as well.
Yeah. So
and Gary Meek, who I've worked with quite a bit for years, and it was sort of, actually I was planning on having Eric Marienthal, who I'd worked with for years also, and it just kind of happened that he was busy, and then Gary came into town, and Gary came over and he played and was great, so just kind of like happened that way.
Yeah. So with all those additional parts on the album, and you're playing this stuff now with 4-piece this week, how do you go about rearranging that stuff? And is it a written thing? Is it an ear thing?
Well, I mean, it's been like that since my first record to a degree, although those early records really they didn't have very many overdubs. But I just look at it as it's good music, and I think when people hear it live, they feel that energy of things in the moment being created. And yeah, we're sacrificing some of the stuff that's on the record. We can't reproduce it, but we're not really worried about it. We just do the best,
but that also
best we can with
leave some gaps for you to to do other stuff.
I mean, we've been doing a few gigs as a trio too with Gary, so that's really
bare bones.
Stripping it down. But it's a great challenge actually, because Jimmy gets to step up and play a lot more and solo quite a bit more because he's a great soloist, and then it's sort of my job to just play the melodies by myself and to kind of make it happen. So that's I have to say it's a
lot of work.
You feel pretty exhausted after doing a show in front of a large crowd as a trio, but so it's easier to spread it out with a quartet. That's it's probably better, I guess. But unfortunately, because of the way things work out budget-wise, and so sometimes it's like we either do the trio thing or we can't take the engagement. So we're happy to do the trio thing. It's fun too. It has its own set of challenges.
Yeah. Jimmy, you played with a lot of drummers. You played with Gary Novak tonight.
Yes.
And you played with Virgil Donati, who
I have,
comes from this town.
Yes, he does.
And how does playing with different drummers affect the way you play bass?
Well, the one concept that I have is once I get into a situation with a drummer, I'm a good listener. So I just try to meld right in with whatever the drummer's doing, and hopefully they're doing the same thing. But in certain cases, when I played with Virgil, for example, it was mostly in a trio with Alan Holdsworth. That music is very complex and very challenging. So I had to kind of survey what was going on. When we did, I think we just had like a couple of quick rehearsals before we actually started working, and then we worked on and off for like 3 years as a trio. I just saw Virgil actually, but in Virgil's case and without the Alan Holdsworth trio, I had to understand my role in that trio, and because of Virgil's intensity and the way he plays, it's very complex in his own playing. And then the way Alan plays music is super complex. So I just relegated myself to basically concentrating on Virgil's kick drum and just being the foundation for all that, which I'm happy to do. That's part of my job as a bass player, to be the foundation of the music. So in that sense, that's what happened there. In this band with Gary Novak and Jeff, there's a lot of parts that are already kind of written into the music, which over the years I've been able to expand upon and do different things. But a lot of the roots of the music are intensely immersed in rhythm and blues for the most part, and jazz. So in that sense, I know what my job is, and I think Jeff's even commented where other bass players have played the music and maybe haven't played the music the way it's written, that can create a problem. If you have a specific bass line that's really important to the song, you have to acknowledge that and play it. If you play something different, it's going to kind of throw everything off the charts. People will not be able to either recognize the piece or be able to play with the way the piece is written. So you have to, in a lot of the music I play, I just have to play what's relegated, but then I find my little spaces and places to be creative and express myself. So that's basically it. And every drummer I play with is different. So my first job is to really understand what the drummer's doing and lock in with that, because that's the foundation of the whole band. And if that's not working, then the band's not going to sound very good.
Yeah.
So,
I assume that a gig like this, where you're at one venue for a week, doesn't occur
no.
a lot. How do you go about creating your set list for a gig?
Well, we
like
have
this?
we have a set list that's big enough where we can do almost completely different sets for the 2 sets that we do each night.
Okay.
And I did bring a couple other things too. If we get a chance to
Some new music.
get in and do a little rehearsal one of these days, we're gonna look at a couple of new tunes that I brought. But I just want to mention one thing about what Jimmy said, which is, in an ensemble, everybody has a responsibility. You have that role, and you got the responsibility to play your part in the ensemble. And I really appreciate the fact that Jimmy understands what that is, and he doesn't, like some guys get bored playing, but Jimmy seems to enjoy playing the parts
my
that
job.
make the songs work.
Yeah.
And when I work with guys that don't want to take that responsibility, it's tough.
Makes it harder for you.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And another thing that we do together that's really fun is that Jimmy plays like a lot of solos where I play bass behind what he's doing. And I really have fun doing that. I really enjoy that, and I think it's kind of a unique thing that people don't hear that often, where a bass player plays like these beautiful melodic solos in a very high register, and then I'll play these cool bass lines underneath, and then it gives me a chance to do something different besides just always playing chords and playing melodies all the time too. So I really, it's a lot of fun.
And he comes up with great bass lines. So for anyone to not acknowledge that, I think is ridiculous, because they're great bass lines. So as soon as he writes a tune and it's got all these really wonderful bass lines in it, I want to learn that.
Yeah.
Because I'm learning something.
It's kind of the bass lines tend to be the foundation of the songs. That's where it starts a lot of times.
We've talked about the past a bit. Let's talk about the future. You're working on a new album?
Yeah.
Yeah.
What's the direction? What's the
We're
concept?
taking more chances again,
Yeah.
I think.
I don't know, the way I look at it is, there's
It's a few
like,
things.
it's sort of split in 2 halves, where there's, I guess one half of it is pretty, I don't know if commercial is the right word, but
Well, it's, I think it's.
I don't think that's a good description actually, because commercial just means that people would buy it. But there's one side that's real jazzy and probably won't get airplay in the U.S. but it's good music, and the other half is stuff that could get airplay. That's
It's melodic and
a little less jazzy than. But the thing that we're excited about is that it's very varied. But I think it's really, we've got some really good songs. It's really like.
It all boils down to the songs. You gotta have good songs.
It's pretty. I'm pretty impressed. So I'm happy with how it's going. We still need a couple more to kind of finish it up, but we're mostly there, and we've kind of used, for the most part, our usual bunch of collaborators, with the exception of we have Andy Snitzer, who's a wonderful sax player from New York. That he's adding so much. It's unbelievable. He sounds really great. It's sort of like having. Bob Mintzer in the band, a little bit like that kind of feeling, like very like, but
It's New York.
yeah, what he's adding is really just adds a lot of power and a lot of passion and great very musical content for all the music that we're doing. So it's kind of lifting us to another level with his involvement.
And they attended the same high school.
Yeah, we went to Cheltenham High in Philadelphia, which is the same place where the Brecker brothers actually went to high school there too.
And Jimmy, what have you got coming up? You doing some producing?
I have, yeah. I just finished, as a local guitar player in LA, a guy named Jeff Richmond. I just finished that record. That's called Sizzle. And a lot of good players on there. I got Vinny Colaiuta and George Whitty playing, a young pianist named Taylor Ixty, and a really great trumpet player named Jeff Beal, and Bob Mintzer is also on it. So that's coming out in November. And then I've also finished a singer from New York named Luba Mason, who happens to be married to Ruben Blades, and that was an interesting record. I recorded a duet with her and Al Jarreau, and also a kind of a duet with a famous Brazilian artist named Dori Caymmi. Randy Brecker played trumpet on some stuff, and then I also just I didn't produce this, but I played on a record by a group called Magic Music. Very interesting project. It's like a progressive rock country type of a band, kind of a cross between the Eagles and Jethro Tull.
I just wanted to talk about the tools that you use for a little while. I believe you've chosen the XF8, the Motiv XF8.
Yeah, you know, Yamaha just came out with a new instrument that's called a Montage, which is sort of the next generation of that. But yeah, I find their keyboards to be, you know, really work well for what I need, both definitely live and also in the studio too. Yeah. But also the other thing that I use a lot is real instruments, like a real Rhodes and a real clavinet and a real piano and stuff like that. I really like using that stuff too.
How far would you drill down with the features of a keyboard like the Motiv for a show like this?
I'm just using mostly real basic stuff. I'm playing a couple of nice Rhodes patches that I found, and I love the balance of between acoustic piano and the Rhodes, because it's like two different dimensions almost, and it's almost like having an extra guy in the band if I have my hands up on those two keyboards. And then besides that, I kind of throw in like some clavinet and some synthesizer, like lead sounds once in a while, and B3.
Yeah.
And definitely I like the sound of the B3.
Yeah. I believe you're quite a collection of vintage synths.
Yeah. You know, I sort of got turned on. It's funny because I think a lot of musicians, myself included, like as all the, like in the 80s, all the like stuff started coming out, like DX7 and D50s, and everybody started throwing all their old stuff away. And I don't know if you know this a guy named David Frank. He was in a group called The System, but he was a good friend of mine. I went over to his place. And I think this was in the 80s, like the mid 80s, late 80s, and he had a Wurlitzer, and I sat down and played the Wurlitzer, and it's like, wow, this is great. It's like it was like a big light bulb went off. So I was sort of one of the first guys to really sort of get back to like buying those instruments again and using them on records. And now it's pretty common. A lot of guys really like the sound of the original vintage keyboards, and it's become quite like in every major city, there's people that buy those instruments and fix them up and make them really beautiful. So it's a nice thing.
What's your most prized possession then?
Well, I just bought a really gorgeous Rhodes in 1972, which I think is the best year. And the thing about it that's amazing is just the way it's just the action is so great. There's this guy in LA named Ken Rich that reconditions them, and but another thing that I have that I don't know if I'm going to keep it necessarily because it's heavy and I don't like lifting it up. But I have an original pretty mint condition Oberheim 4-voice, which was the first polyphonic synthesizer. They're really rare. There was this store in Atlanta that I knew about where a guy had an original one that he had bought in the 80s. And I kept calling him up like every year to see if he wanted to sell it to me because I didn't want to pay quite what he had in mind, and then eventually I finally bought it from him. But that's a pretty special instrument also.
And he's got what's that organ that Keith Jarrett played with Miles?
Oh, the Fender combo organ. Yeah.
He's got one
from the Isle of Wight.
And I was also impressed because you have one of those Fender bass keyboards like that Ray Manzarek used to play in the Doors, right?
Yeah, I mean, it's just these instruments are just I just love having them. They're just so much fun. And I've sort of recently, over the last year or so, I've started to make sure they're all like plugged in and like ready to go, that you can just like walk up to them, and because usually you got to plug these things into something. Yeah. And so a lot of times that, you can't actually like play them and make noise, but I have them, I've sort of hooked it up, so.
Well, there are songs in those things. You got to have them on.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And some of them actually, if you don't play them, they like I have an Arp Odyssey, if you don't play it, it'll kind of stop working. You have to kind of keep it going.
Yeah.
Keep the oscillators moving.
And Jimmy, what's your rig for the shows?
Well, actually, I endorse a company. It's a brand new company. They have no representation here in Australia, unfortunately. So I don't have that rig with me. But it's a company called Trickfish, and they're only a year old. Really wonderful gear. But I guess a gentleman from here heard I was coming in. A guy named Wayne Jones.
I know Wayne. Yeah.
So he brought his rig down, and I'm playing through that. And I've been endorsing this bass company out of Greensboro, North Carolina, since 1997. They built me an instrument back then that I'm still playing today, and it's a company called Roscoe Guitars.
Yeah.
And so I have a 6-string fretted Roscoe bass, and playing through Wayne's rig, and that's it. It's just cut and dry. I don't have a lot of bells and whistles. It's just a bass and an amp. That's it.
Yeah.